morning and welcome to Shift. If this is your first time here, we would love it if you would scan this QR code, and if you fill out that Connect card, we'll send you some free Opus coffee. And make sure to check out the Coffee with Joe option so that you can have the Cup of Joe with Joe. That way, you can ask any and all questions that you want or need to know. Our All Shift meeting has been moved to June 23rd due to our interview with Zach and Ryan going over. It's going to be right after service, no more than 30 minutes. We're going to be talking about the next 6 months and opening up about all the financials for everybody. And childcare is available for those who need it. Our next serve day is going to be June 30th, and it's going to be right here. We're going to be doing a deep clean of the space to say thank you to Westminster for being such amazing hosts. And it'll also benefit the 10 AA and NA groups that meet here, along with the Girl Scout troops and the events the Human Rights Coalition puts on here. You can scan the code and scroll down to register for a specific job and or to bring in cleaning supplies. We're gonna start here at about 10 and be done no later than noon. And now it's time for week 6 of our series, Coming Home.
For any that are new in person or online, my name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor. This is week 6 of a series that we've called Coming Home. And home is a metaphorical place that we spend our childhood trying to leave. And then once we do, we spend the rest of our lives trying to restore. And the metaphor for home is different for all of us. And because that thing that is home is so deeply meaningful for each person, we've been starting each gathering with a moment to just kind of root ourselves, a moment to ground ourselves in this time and space. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to ask you to please close your eyes. And I ask that whatever came before this, that you just gently set it aside. And whatever is coming next, that you allow it to stay where it is next. So take a few deep cleansing breaths. And as you do, focus on the rhythms of your body, the cadence of your breathing, the pattern of your heartbeat. Allow your body to feel. And as you feel, what are your intentions for today? What do you need from this time together? And what do you need from me? When I say the word home, what comes to mind? It can be the same thing that it's been for the past several weeks, or it could take a new form today. I want you to hold whatever that is for you. Now, when I say the word significant other, what does that mean for you? What do you picture? And I want you to hold on to that image. Take a few more deep breaths and come back into your bodies. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. Now, before we really dive into this, I want to tell you that I'm not giving a talk on marriage. I will touch on it, right? But the idea of significant other isn't just located around a marriage partner or even a romantic partner. It can be, but it's not limited to that. So I'm going to say out loud as well that this topic, the topic of significant others, if it is too sensitive or hits too close to home, then I'm going to ask you to guard yourself and feel free, honestly, to quietly leave this space. Or if you're watching online, to stop watching. You will not hurt my feelings in doing so. Now, when I say significant other, I of course think of Tori, my wife Tori. She is my most significant other. She is the one that has shown me what love really looks like, and we've had our rough patches, but honestly, they have been few and far between. We rarely fight. Do I get on her nerves? No. Seriously? Now, if you know me at all, you know I do. Of course I do. And she gets on mine, but there's no other person that I would rather have get on my nerves than her. Humans are called into these types of deep relationships because we need at least one other person that can be a mirror for us. Our significant others mirror the best and the worst of us in ways that we can digest. And it's through these relationships that we can let down our guard and receive the lessons that love teach us. And what's fascinating about a mirror is that it doesn't alter the image in any way. It reflects it exactly as it is. Our closest friends and life partners act as mirrors, exposing both the positive and negative traits, and reminding us of our ongoing struggle to truly love ourselves and love others. This is the hallmark of every healthy relationship. Loving another person means delving into an endless mystery. And the concept of this is echoed by Jesus when he uses the symbolic number of 70 times 7 to illustrate the number of times even the best of us have to forgive one another. Now, I don't remember the first time that Tori called me out on my own junk, but I never enjoyed it. I would be acting out of my ego, out of my false self, because someone said or did something, or I had done something, and it wounded that ego. It tarnished the persona that I was trying to portray to her, to those around me, and even to myself. And especially in those early years, my ego would be hurt because of how I came across to her. And I was very ego-driven. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what the author of the letter to the early church in a city called Galatia said about this in Galatians chapter 6. Can you go ahead and show that? It says this, my friends, if anyone is detected in a transgression, and I'll go through this, so don't let any language throw you off. You who have received the Spirit should restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Take care that you yourselves are not tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. For if those who are nothing think they are something, they deceive themselves. And what the author is trying to say here is this calling to each other, this to and from our significant is another way of talking about this gentle mirroring when we deviate from the path. And that's what the word transgression implies here. The word paraptoma, that's the Greek word, and it means just a lapse or deviation from truth. It is that gentle and loving embrace that guides us back to the path of a Jesus-centered life. To carry another person's burden is another way of talking about that mirroring. And only when we operate out of the ego or the false self do we consider ourselves too good for this work. Anytime I failed at something that men were supposed to do, like quote unquote, my false self would show up. And that's when Tori would gently, and sometimes not so gently, be that mirror for me. And all of us need people that do that. And thank God for them, because it's through them that the Spirit reminds us that we are operating inside of an abundant, limitless, infinite love. So even though we constantly fail, failure is not the final word. These significant others show us that hope, that everything can be mended, healed, and restored. One of Jesus' closest relationships that we see in the 4 accounts of his life is a man by the name of Peter. And Peter was incredibly brash. He was very bold. That guy was all ego, all bravado. He even one time declared that no matter what happens to Jesus, he would never in a million years turn his back on Jesus. And this took place during a meal that they shared together that's known as the Last Supper, which is the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his friends before being arrested and executed. And the story says that Jesus then tells Peter that before the rooster crows that next morning, that he will have denied him 3 separate times in true to form. Peter does so. And then Jesus is taken to be flogged and then executed. And you can imagine how Peter must have felt, like how distraught, how guilty he felt that in the darkest moments of his friend's life, that he abandoned Jesus, right? And I don't know why it is, but it's within these significant relationships that we have the greatest ability to harm. Now, maybe it's because we're at our most vulnerable, we're at our most open within these relationships, but we harm no other like we do those closest to us. The greatest damage that I ever did to our marriage was allowing my wife, my life partner, my most significant other to be put in the back seat. She played second to the church for far too many years. And I allowed leaders and pastors and elders to dictate what was most important in my life. I once had a head elder, a lead elder by the name of Pat at our church in Wentzville. That's Wentzville Christian Church, if anybody's super curious. I had him come to me one time in a meeting and tell me that he wanted me to work so many hours. He wanted me working so many hours that he would have to come to the church and tell me to go home so that I could be with my wife and kids. He was the main reason that I quit the church, that I put in my 2 weeks. If he happened to see this, and he probably won't, I would thank him. Because it was his insane need and drive to be a megachurch that finally opened my eyes to see just how idiotic and harmful the entire system is. The hours I spent away from my wife and my children for stupid programs and trips and meetings, my God, the meetings. So many meetings, never ending, and we had to discuss every little detail because God forbid we ever do anything that might not be perfect. And what if the person that has all the money, and there was one specific person, didn't like something and they got mad and stopped giving? I have so many stories. If there's a hell, I can guarantee on some level there's a church meeting happening right now. And as a matter of fact, I think that that's probably the punishment for all of these megachurch pastors. Just an endless church board meeting where every time they look at the clock, there's just 5 minutes left for eternity. I allowed all of that to push my most significant other to the back seat. My denial, the same as Peter's, wounded my wife so deeply that her recovering is still ongoing a decade later. But don't forget, however, these significant others show us that we have hope that everything can be mended, healed, and restored, right? Even though Peter had that guilt and that deep shame, the story wasn't over. In the Gospel of John, chapter 21, we see Jesus appearing to his disciples. They're out to sea fishing. He's on the shore. He makes a fire. He calls out to them. Peter sees and actually jumps into the water and swims to land. They eat breakfast together, and then Jesus pulls Peter aside. And we see this in John chapter 21, 15 through 17. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." Go ahead. A second time he said to him, you can go ahead to the next one. A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And after all this is over, Jesus basically says, "Come on, Peter." And this is known as the restoration of Peter. What was once a weak part of their relationship now becomes the strongest. Just like the healing and mending of bone or the welding of steel, it's that point of weakness that is now the strongest part of that bone or that steel. It's through the breaking. It's through the welding, through the mending, that the true beauty of a relationship is formed. And this is the essence of intimacy, asking for forgiveness, admitting our mistakes, and acknowledging when we fall short. And let me add to this, not hating ourselves for it. Of course, we don't want to hurt those people that are closest to us, right? We don't want to hurt our significant others, but we will. And when we make mistakes and honestly admit the mistake, we learn vulnerability. And it's through this that we come to understand that we are constantly diving deeper into something that we can never fully master, a persistent vulnerability, an ongoing risk. And it's that kind of vulnerability and intimacy that isn't something we need only occasionally. Over time, it becomes part of our nature to apologize, part of our nature to admit shortcomings, and part of our nature to seek forgiveness, and part of our nature to avoid the self-loathing that we've been taught that is part of it. To be vulnerable is to be known, to be deeply, intimately, No, all of our parts brought into the light. And this is the dance of divine and human intimacy. Learning to be vulnerable with God and then with each other, or vice versa. And we do that only when we feel safe. How many times do we see that played out in the Jesus story? The most marginalized people showing up and being transformed only because they feel safe. And we see that in one of the most crucial but overlooked people in all of the New Testament, Mary Magdalene. In the Jesus account called Luke in chapter 8, she is mentioned as some of the women, that's actually verbatim, traveling with Jesus. Now understand that this downgrading is done with intention, as the writers were enmeshed in their patriarchal system just as much as any anti-woke pastor such as Mark Driscoll is today. It's just as harmful and just as wrong. Mary was a financially independent woman in a time period where that wasn't the norm. She helped financially support the ministry of Jesus and was incredibly close to him. She was with him until his final breath and was the first person the resurrected Jesus appeared to. And I, along with others, this is not an argument that I came up with, but it's one I support, that if not the first, she is among the first disciples of Jesus. And also in that Luke 8, there's a sentence in there where it says that Jesus heals her, releases her of 7 demons. And that's significant because what we see is a person in need, and that need being met with love and safety. And because of that love and safety, it creates a space for her to grow and be transformed, which means vulnerability. You cannot grow without the ability to recognize that you need to grow. And you cannot recognize that need until you feel safe. My safest person is my wife. She knows the parts of me that I keep hidden from everyone else. There is not a single person on this planet that knows me, all of me, like Tori. And that doesn't just happen with our significant others. Like, it takes time and intention. You have to build trust. That safety has to play itself out again and again before we learn to trust it. And that doesn't happen overnight. When Tori and I first started dating, and even into the first year of our marriage, she was incredibly guarded. She was that way because the previous men in her life sucked. And she couldn't bring herself to believe that I wouldn't leave just like the other ones did. And it took time. It took me showing up every day for that to change. And over time, she felt safe. People who truly transform are the ones that feel safe, valued, and loved, right? When you experience love, safety, and a sense of dignity, you continue to grow. And this is what we give each other in these loving relationships and with these significant others. It's what our relationship with the divine looks like. If your relationship with God isn't rooted in love and safety, it's not a relationship, it's a cult. So only when we feel safe can real and healthy transformation occur. And this kind of love isn't merely sentimental because it holds tremendous power. The kind of power that gives people permission to be vulnerable, to be seen, right? And in being seen, to be free. One of my favorite quotes that talks about this is by Richard Rohr from the book Falling Upward. And I have the graphic here for you. It says, "Once we have faced our hidden or denied self, there's not much else to be anxious about anymore because there is no fear of exposure. We are no longer afraid to be seen by ourselves or others. The game is over and we are free. We are finally who we are and can be who we are without disguise or fear." 1 year ago this past Thursday, 1 year ago this past week, Tori was admitted into the hospital with a periotonsillar abscess and MSSA staph infection. That's a mouthful. Our doctors didn't tell us this until after she was released, but I was told that if we had waited one more day, that they would have had to admit her into the ICU. It was that close. It was only that close and that dangerous because her doctor at the time just kept ignoring warning signs. We fired her immediately. As a matter of fact, the only reason we went to the hospital in the first place is because Rachel said, who is a pediatrician, said, "Get your butt in here. Let me look at this." And while we were there in the hospital, they started running all of these tests to figure out what in the world was going on. to find this infection. And while doing so, they discovered a tumor that was on her thyroid that had a high probability of being cancer. And thankfully, it was a slow-growing cancer, kind of cancer, but even in that, right? Just the word, just that C word, when it gets thrown out, creates a lot of fear. And during that time period, we had a lot of deep talks, a lot of discussions leading up to that surgery in October of last year and after. And her body is still out of whack because she doesn't have a thyroid. And that stupid little thing controls so much. But she is still cancer-free, and once we hit that year mark, the likelihood of it ever returning diminishes greatly. And so for us, this last year has been marked with great difficulty, but with that difficulty has come great vulnerability as well. I have seen all of who she is, and she has seen all of me. All the parts hidden in the shadow have come to light. And it's through the hardship, but let me say this, but not because of the hardship. And I think that's an important distinction, especially for those of us that grew up in the church. God didn't do X so that Y would happen, okay? We choose to partner with God in squeezing every ounce of good from any situation, right? So it's not because of this that this happened. It's the hardship that we went through the hardship, right? The breaking and the mending of things. It was through that came a strength in our relationship that wasn't there before. So I ask you, who are those people in your life? Who are the ones that see you? Who are the ones that you see? Who are the people that give you a safe place to grow and to transform? Who are the ones that trust you with their transformation? Whose burdens do you carry and whose burdens are carried by others? This is the meaning of the metaphor of Christ as the bridegroom and the church as the bride. It's not about an actual marriage or non-marriage, so when people throw that up, and they love to throw that up this month, it has nothing to do with your relationship with whoever. It is about using a picture of human vulnerability and intimacy to show what our relationship with the divine can be. And this is why Jesus used the image of the wedding feast so many times to describe the kingdom. Jesus models for us the trust to embrace our intrinsic connection and union with God. That union isn't some destination that we will reach in the future. Union with God is our origin. It is our starting point. It is the way that we are meant to live now. And this is the aim of biblical revelation, to achieve complete and mutual indwelling. And this mystery of incarnation reaches its fulfillment in the story of the marriage feast of the Lamb as pictured in Revelation 19. Why our significant others are so significant and crucial in our lives is because they are a glimpse into the eternal. Those people in your life right now are a snapshot of our relationship with this universal creative spirit of love that is God. It's through the relationships that we experience union. And union comes from the people that gently mirror our good and bad back to us and then lovingly guide us back to that Jesus-centered life. Union comes from the significant others where the weak points have been mended and healed and are now the strongest parts of the relationship. And union comes from being safe, from being seen and seeing. These significant others are the living metaphor of the wedding feast and give us a glimpse into our divine relationship with the Creator. Hold tight to the ones that give you permission to come home. If you're new, we end each week with a time of reflection. We do that to allow you time to listen to your body and listen to the Spirit. In a moment, Jen will come back up and sing, and Meg. And the lights are going to be turned off. You know the drill. To help create some intimacy. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then I'll pray. And then we'll have a time to end with communion for any that are wanting to, that are willing. That symbolic table is open to all people. And each week, we use that to reflect on what we've heard and learned And today, let it remind us of the union we already enjoy with God as modeled for us by Jesus. So I ask you to close your eyes and take a few deep cleansing breaths once again, to listen to the rhythms of your body and to bring back to mind those things that you've been holding from the beginning. What was it that you needed from me today? What was it that you needed from today? Did it come to you? And if so, what's it saying to you? If it did not, why not? What resonated with you the most today? And how will you continue to hold on to that? What is your biggest obstacle with these significant relationships? For example, is your ego or false self getting in the way? And how can you overcome these obstacles? My final question isn't a question, but a challenge. My challenge is for you to take an honest inventory of these significant relationships. Ask yourself if they are the priority in your life. And depending on your answer, I want you to commit to taking steps to either strengthen that relationship or to making that relationship the priority. And if you need help, we can connect you with things, with people, with professionals to help you do that. And I don't care if you didn't hear anything else I say other than this. Don't sit there and waste the gift of these relationships. Let's pray. God of union, thank you for these beautiful, significant others that bring so much meaning to our lives. We thank you for the ways in which they give meaning to our day-to-day, to the mundane. And we thank you that they are a glimpse into the eternal mystery that you are. May we see them for what they are, a miracle. And I pray for those that are struggling in these relationships right now. I pray that we're all able to set aside ego and our false selves. Give us strength to be vulnerable and to risk being seen. And I pray for those that are thriving in these relationships. May they be an encouragement for us all. We thank you for how Christ modeled this for us. Pray that you give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Bring comfort to the afflicted, healing to the broken, and freedom to the chained. In the name of Christ, amen.